All right, this is Ubaid on behalf of V Electronics, and in this video, we'll be looking at the neoclassical perspective when it comes to economics. Okay, now the neoclassical perspective, I've talked about neoclassical in the past couple of videos, has to do with supply rather than demand. Okay, so we have neoclassical over here, and if you draw a graph, suppose this is your price level over here, this is your real GDP. Okay, and suppose this is your short range average supply curve, SRAS. Okay, and suppose this is your long range average supply curve, LRAS, or also full potential, full employment, potential GDP. And suppose you have aggregate demand that meets right at this point over here, okay, with your short range average supply curve and your long range average supply curve. All right, now this zone over here, this is your neoclassical zone. This is neoclassical zone. This is your intermediary zone. And right where the curve starts off flat, this is your Keynesian zone. So this is Keynesian. And based on these zones, we know that as aggregate demand either shifts to the left or to the right, okay, so let's say this is your aggregate demand, either goes to the left or to the right. Okay, the price levels won't change for the Keynesian zone. Okay, which means the wages and the prices are sticky. Okay, however, the output does change. So real GDP will change. Okay, production will change. Okay, now, unfortunately, with the neoclassical zone, okay, the output does not change because neoclassical zone assumes that as long as you supply a full potential, okay, there should be demand in the economy somewhere. Okay, whereas Keynesian zone has to do with creating demand for supply. All right, and for that reason, when it comes to your neoclassical perspective, okay, this curve over here, this is your aggregate demand, may shift up or down and may change the price levels. And this has to do with price levels of basket of goods. And we've talked about basket of goods. This has to do with your GDP. Okay, so price times quantity will give you your nominal GDP, and then you can use your nominal GDP along with inflation, okay, to figure out your real GDP. So this is basket of goods. And because this has to do with basket of goods, as the prices go up and down, they will impact your wages and retail prices as well. So wages may go up and down, okay, and retail prices may go up and down. And the reason for this, as the price level of goods go up and down, okay, this has to do with prices as well as the quantity of goods. Okay, so in that case, what's going to end up happening is, okay, if the prices go up and down, the employer is obviously making more money for the same amount of production. The production stays the same at full potential. Okay, the employment stays the same, which means the employer is not hiring any more workers. The suppliers within the economy in a nation, they're not hiring any more workers. Okay, they're not changing the amount of production as well because the production stays at full potential. Okay, but what changes is the prices. Now, if the prices change, obviously they will be able to pay their employees more, as a result of which the wages may change as well as aggregate demand goes up. If demand goes up, okay, they can supply more, as a result of which they can pay their employees more. All right, so that's the reason why when it comes to neoclassical zone, the wages and the prices are not sticky. All right, so wages and prices are not sticky. And that's one of the concepts when it comes to your neoclassical perspective. And the other concept has to do with the economy revolving around the full potential. Okay, so the second concept has to do with economy based on full potential, which is your long range average supply curve or full employment. Okay, so the idea behind neoclassical perspective is to keep your supply and demand at around this zone, okay, which means that, okay, the supply and demand should meet, okay, at long range average supply, your potential GDP. And the reason for this is because if the supply goes over, let's say the supply over here goes over your full potential, okay, what's going to end up happening is, okay, you're producing unsustainably, okay, which means the suppliers are able to produce at full potential without putting pressure on their machines, putting pressure on their employees, putting pressure on their resources. However, should they go over the long range average supply curve or the full potential GDP, okay, they're putting too much pressure on their employees. Maybe the employees are working full time and maybe overtime. Okay, the employers are using machines 24/7. Okay, so on and so forth. Okay, now apart from that, if the aggregate demand, okay, goes over full potential, there's too much demand, okay, for the amount of production that the suppliers can produce. Okay, so your suppliers cannot supply that demand at full potential. As a result of which, if they have to supply that demand, they will be putting too much pressure on their resources, on their machinery, on their labor, which is not sustainable over a long period of time. As a result of which, okay, the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, your average supply, short range average supply, should stay at full potential. And that's the second concept when it comes to your neoclassical perspective, okay, which basically says economy should be based off full potential. All right, so that would be it for this video. On behalf of V Electronics, this is Obey. Have yourself a great day.